Thank you. I had a moment when Luca announced it, noting that our chairman was once at PwC, that Luca would discover that he pulled the wrong envelope out. But it's a wonderful honor, and it's particularly an honor coming from this organization and this group of people, because it really means something. The nice thing has been that people like it. That doesn't necessarily mean they agree with it, but it was an effort to make a lot of things accessible, and so open to people who, when it would be presented in a more technical fashion, would be simply hard to get to. Whatever else, this at least reads easily. At one level, the paper is, as Lucas suggested, a history. It starts in the 1960s, where corporate law was the nice way of putting it, it was arid. The truth is, it was boring, as you can imagine. And it's a story about how it went from a bunch of traffic rules to a circumstance where it's much broader than the law, and its function is to cause companies to produce more. So it went from rules to being a part of a complicated structure that is designed to generate productivity. The point of the history, in some ways the best historical methodology comes from a comment that's ascribed to Mark Twain, an American, the most wonderful American humanist, though there's really no evidence that he ever said it. What is ascribed to him is the concept that history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. And the process of trying to work through a pattern where corporate law became much broader, had much more impact, and as a result much more complicated as it became important in a business environment which became faster, which was increasingly faster moving, and itself more complicated. If we can figure out what the rhyme is, then we can say something intelligent about where it's going. And then it's a lesson that's important, because the only thing that strikes me about looking forward is to remember my high school calculus. The second derivative of change in the business environment is positive. It's not just that things are changing, it's the rate of change is going up. And that means you don't have time. You need to understand what you're doing early on. And suddenly you begin to get, for me, the rhyme is that corporate governance is driven by the capital market. Capital markets serve to allow risk to be shared. Changes in the capital market generate what kinds of instruments we can use, and corporate governance operates to support that risk transfer. The faster the capital market moves, the faster governance is going to move, and the more we understand that connection, the more we're going to be able to look ahead. I think the best example is Japan. Japan has been in what may be the longest recession in recorded history. They have made, particularly under Mr. Abe, they have made dramatic changes in their corporate law. If you just look at the law, it's really quite good. It looks like the most progressive legal rules anywhere. But nothing has changed, because the legal rules operated as embedded in a cluster of other institutions, other social institutions, the labor market, in particular the market for managers. There is no horizontal market for managers in Japan. The change that has to happen is one that involves all of it. When you change one thing in an integrated system, it performs poorly, because everything had been made to fit together. and it takes longer to change everything. So the irony and the politically difficult thing is you make a change which is supposed to be wonderful, and it is, except the first response is that performance gets worse. And that's disconcerting and discomforting to everybody who supported it. But there's kind of no way around it. You have to take it down before you can build it up again. And again, we are better off if we know what's coming rather than being surprised. Japan is largely still waiting, but it's going to depend on the resiliency of the social institutions that exist, because now you're no longer thinking about changing the law. That's easy. You persuade the Diet to change the rules. You also have to change the social systems in which those rules operate, and those change on their own. You can't just tell people change your expectations about what your job is like. That's a process, and I think the best I can say is that if we understand that the systems are both path dependent and depend on the fit of all the elements, then we can be more thoughtful about how we try to design the change. It becomes even more important where there's been a debate that's been going on for 20 years. Are corporations managed to short-term or to long-term? And the short answer is it's not a management's choice. It's driven by the underlying technology. So Apple, Apple, they don't even call it a computer anymore. Apple is the most valuable company in the world. Next September, they're going to bring out their Apple 10 or 8, whatever the number is, their 10th anniversary. If people don't think it's terrific, it'll knock a third of the market cap off. It's a year, their product cycle's a year and a half. That's not long-term, and it can't be. One would have thought 5 years ago that the most long-term investment you could imagine is in autonomous automobiles. 5 years ago, people thought you couldn't do it. Uber is testing autonomous taxis in Phoenix now. Long-term, short-term. So having this debate in the governance area where we should be more long-term. I don't know if we should be more long-term. It depends on the product. If I'm digging an iron mine, it's going to take a while. If I'm doing almost anything else, it's not. So as the market gets more complex, as industries get more complex, and hence companies get more complex, the easy rules, the slogans, be long-term, don't work. It's key to a company. It's key to particular product cycles, and the governance system has to support that kind of flexibility. To give an example, there was a period in California when buying grapes was terribly political because labor was treated badly, and the notion was boycott grapes and things will change. Familiar. Grapes were a seasonal product then. They're not, because the off-season, they're being flown in from Chile, and the technology that's available changes the market. So a long-term industry like agriculture, which has been around for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, changes quickly because the technology changes. And the ability for in my view, but lots of people disagree, what a governance system has to do is facilitate a company being adaptive with respect to change. Because the only thing I think that is obvious is the change is just going to continue to happen, and ever more quickly. What I hope it does more than anything else is that when people offer simple answers to complex questions, it will help people say that's nonsense. I think the world of ECGI. One of the questions that often, and being a fellow of ECGI is one of the nicest things that's ever happened in my professional life. People on occasion ask, why isn't there an American Corporate Governance Institute? And the short answer is, ECGI provides that function. There isn't room for it or the need for anything else. And frankly, ECGI just does it better because it integrates one theme of my paper is that it takes more than one discipline to talk intelligently about corporate governance. And ECGI meshes the different disciplines better than any other organization that I'm familiar with. So for people like me who do some things but are users of others, the access to the range of people that are available through ECGI is just a wonderful benefit.